I would say that I think that says everything you need to know right now about where the Liberal Party is at. I think they're focused on surviving and on basically regaining their status as a party in the legislature.
Welcome back to the Radical Center. This week's episode is very, very special. We have a very special guest with us today. Just so you're all aware, we did invite all of the leaders for the, for the ongoing provincial election, and we did get a response from a very special leader who is running to become the Premier of Ontario. Marit Stiles is here with us today. She is the leader of the NDP, and I'm going to let Cody go ahead and give us a bit more of an introduction.
Well, thank you very much, Nokha. Look, we certainly appreciate Marit's time. And, here on the Radical Center, our goal is to give everybody the presumption of grace and, to keep our discourse civil because, as we've seen from that debate, if you did watch it, it could get nasty. But Marit Stiles was born in St. John's, Newfoundland. She came to Ontario for an education at Carleton University. She was elected to the Toronto District School Board in 2014. Elected to the Ontario legislature as the MPP for Davenport in 2018. And finally, in February of 2023, she was elected the leader of the Ontario New Democrat Party and the leader of the official opposition. Marit, thank you so much for joining us today. My first question to you was going to be, how is the campaign going with just over a week to go? But because I was born in Gander and we're both East Coasters, I'm going to say, what are you at?
What are you at, By? I'm just great. It's been fun. It's been a few weeks, and wow, Gander! I didn't know that. That's awesome. Yeah, I'm doing good. It's been a busy campaign, and of course, it was a bit of a snap election in the winter. So I know that it's been tough for a lot of our campaigns to get going, and we've had a lot of volunteers out there knocking on doors in the snowstorms, but it's going well, and I'm feeling a lot of momentum right now building up as the excitement grows. And I think more people are kind of waking up to the fact that there's an election happening.
Let's talk a little bit about the tariffs. Doug Ford called the snap election because he said he needs a strong mandate to protect Ontario from the tariff threats that are coming our way from the United States. Was this the right call in your opinion? And if not, if you're elected premier, how would you deal with the issue of the tariffs?
Well, these tariffs and the threats from Donald Trump are existential threats to our economy and to our sovereignty. So they're very serious. But I don't think Doug Ford should have called an election in the middle of that. I think that especially with a lot of uncertainty at the federal level, what we need is stability right now. I'm a big believer in a strong, united, Canada first approach to these tariffs. I think we need to work at all levels of government, and that having individual premiers off freelancing is not helpful. And I think the other thing I would say is, in addition to, going to the table with a strong position in negotiations, if there is a renegotiation happening with the United States, we also have to rethink a lot of things here in Canada. And I think you see that in the way that Canadians and people in Ontario have stepped up just in the last few weeks even. People are starting to say, you know what, I'm going to choose to buy Ontario. I'm going to buy Canadian. I'm going to, think a little bit more about where I spend my hard-earned dollars. I think that's the kind of thing that Ontarians need to do more of. And our government has a lot of buying and spending power. And so we should make sure that we're spending our taxpayer dollars to create more jobs and opportunities here through procurement. Things like a good example of that would have been the Ontario line. Those cars for the Ontario line are being built by Hitachi in the United States. In fact, Doug Ford changed the rules to allow that to happen. They should have gone to an Ontario company. Folks up at Alstom, up in Thunder Bay, could be building those right now. So we need to make smart decisions and good deals for Ontario. So that's critical. And then the other thing I've been talking a lot about is making our economy more tariff proof. What does that mean? It means ensuring that we look to other democratic allies and trade relationships increasingly. I mean, the United States will always be an important trade partner, but we have other friends out there that we need to rely on. And I think we also need to make sure, again, we build up our own industry, our self-reliance, and build up our Canadian and Ontario content here. It's absolutely critical. But we need a healthy population. We are very vulnerable right now. We're in a very vulnerable position right now because people right now are already dealing with rising costs of everything. Healthcare is in crisis. People are already anxious. And I don't think that's a good position to be in. So we need to build up our communities, build up our economy, strengthen our services here in Ontario in order to be more tariff proof.
So we're going to talk a little bit about affordability, as you touched on. I am a construction electrician. I build high-rise buildings for a living. So it's no secret to me and people in my industry that the top of mind issue is the economy.
Yes.
My wife and I, we're lucky enough where we make enough money where at the end of the month we don't have to worry about paying the bills. But there are people out there who are struggling to afford groceries, pay the rent, and put gas in their tank. So what is your party's plan to put an end to the cost of living crisis that we're in? Not just put a Band-Aid over it.
Absolutely. And I would say, look, there's no question, right? This affordability crisis, this rising cost crisis, which has mounted extraordinarily since Doug Ford was elected, is a top issue for almost everybody I talk to. So, and there's a couple of areas where we see this increasingly, as you mentioned. One is, I think, in the rising cost of food, groceries. The other is housing. And whether that's, buying a home, although I think increasingly for most, certainly my own daughters who are young adults, for their generation, probably for your generation, increasingly out of the question for so many people. The possibility of ever buying a home seems just impossible. And we can change that absolutely by building more options for people. But we also need to address the soaring cost of rent. And we've seen rent increase in the province of Ontario 38% on average across the province since Doug Ford was elected. And that's not just in big cities, right? That's in small towns all across this province. So the first thing I would say is we need to bring back real rent control. We need to stop people from losing their homes in the first place and frankly, give people an opportunity to just manage the cost of living day to day and maybe one day save for something else. We also need to build truly deeply affordable homes. And, every other province in the country has a provincial agency to build deeply, truly affordable homes. And we're going to call it Homes Ontario. Ontario used to do this up until the mid-90s when Conservatives canceled it. But again, every other province has one. We need to get back in the business of building homes, partnering with builders, partnering with municipalities and nonprofits. But they need a true partner. And as you know, housing starts are down in Ontario. We're at levels now that we haven't seen since the 1950s. So Doug Ford talks a really good game about this. But we're not seeing anything happen. In BC, housing builds are 4 times what we're seeing here in Ontario. So we can change this and we need to kickstart it with a provincial agency pushing that forward. So that's one thing. But I also want to talk about groceries because certainly those have increased quite exceptionally. They're skyrocketing. And so what we're going to do is we are going to try to give some people a bit of relief from that. So we're bringing in a government food grocery rebate program. So people who are kind of lower middle income families would qualify. And it's calculated based on the amount of increase in the cost of food for like a basket of goods, since 2018. And we're going to give those to people monthly. So there'll be a monthly rebate. For a family of 4, that could mean about $120 a month. That's not insignificant. And that's going to mean money in their pockets that they can use to spend on food for their families. And as you all know, this is a real issue in the province of Ontario. We have to address the lineups at our food banks. The fact that people have multiple jobs and still need to go to food banks is shameful. So these are some of the things we're talking about, but we're also going to address some of the price gouging that is resulting in some of these extraordinary costs. So we're going to put in place a consumer watchdog to toughen up some of our protections against price gouging and put a few other restrictions in place for some of the big grocery retailers.
Let's talk a little bit about healthcare. Bonnie Crombie and the Liberal Party have promised that everyone in Ontario will have a family doctor in 4 years. It takes longer than 4 years to become a family doctor, let alone get in the system and start working. How realistic is that, do you think, given the complexities of our healthcare system?
I always say, like, the healthcare crisis that we're dealing with in Ontario, the hallway healthcare crisis, for example, which Doug Ford said he was going to address in 2018, it started under the previous government. It's gotten a lot worse under this government. And there's no question. I mean, 2.5 million Ontarians don't have a family doctor right now. That number will double almost by the end of this year if we don't do something fast. So we have a similar commitment in terms of like making sure that within 4 years, every Ontarian has access to a family doctor. But I want to tell you, there are things we can do very quickly that will help to alleviate some of the strain right away. And one of the big ones is, and I hear this all the time from family doctors, right? They'll tell you, I want to do what I was trained to do, which is see patients, help people. And a lot of our family physicians, our primary care doctors, are dealing with enormous administrative paperwork burden. So we've proposed this to the government now a few times. They voted against it. But look, we can immediately get more doctors seeing more patients immediately by reducing that, by connecting them with other support and family health teams. This is one way to immediately free up a little bit of space for more patients to be seen. We also have a lot of internationally trained physicians who are in our country right now. And we know that other governments have, like, everybody always promises they're going to somehow speed this up, but it seems like we never get it done. We've been working really hard on this. My deputy leader, Dali Begum, who's the MPP for Scarborough Southwest, she's been working on this very hard. We know that we can get that done a lot faster. It just takes the political will to get it done. And that will also mean more quickly getting people working in our communities. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, a big part of this is we have to create more spaces in our medical schools, more residencies. That's crucial. And then we also have to look at other healthcare professionals, right? Like nurses. And so in addition to making sure that every Ontarian has a family doctor, we really have to address the overall, I would say, human resource crisis that we have, right? We have nurses leaving our hospitals and our community care and long-term care because they've been disrespected, because the situation is just impossible in the hospitals. We're bringing in nurse-patient ratios, which will make life better for them. We're not going to take them to court to try to suppress their wages. That's really critical. And we are really focused on models that give people access in their communities to healthcare when and where they need it. Things like integrated family health teams.
Okay, that's wonderful, and thank you for sharing that. It's a very well thought out plan for healthcare in Ontario. We have both had the privilege of serving as school board trustees, so I must ask you about education. And what are you going to do to ensure the needs of all students are met in our education system if you become the premier?
You know, it's very similar in my experience and opinion, and I'm sure, Nokha, you would agree, to kind of what's happened in healthcare. And in the Ford government has actually underfunded education. We're funding at about $1,500 less per student than we were before 2018. That's a significant decrease in funding. And so that explains a lot about why we see bigger class sizes, but also just kids not getting the support they need. Teachers burning out, education workers, educational assistants burning out. Many of our boards can't find anyone to fill these roles anymore because it's just so bad. And that's really letting our kids down. And we want to set every student up with success, right? It's critical to the success of our families, but also to our economy, right? So I'm very committed to this. I think we have to rethink the funding formula that we have for education. So not only do we have to increase funding, but we actually have to think a little bit more carefully about where we spend that money. And I think it's really important to fund education based on student needs and not just on the number of bums that are in seats, right? And that's a rethink of how we fund education. It's significant, but it's critical because we've seen in this province, again, lots of those education workers leave the system, and we're not going to be able to attract them back until we actually can ensure and they know that they're going to be supported as well. And this government has just disrespected education to such an extent. Again, taking education workers to court to suppress their wages, like just so disrespectful. And I think, it's hard work. It's important work. And we need everyone. We need early childhood educators. We need mental health support in each of our schools. And the other thing we need is for our kids to go to school with full bellies. And so I'm really excited that we have a program in place, a universal school food program, to ensure that every child has food in their bellies when they go to school so they can learn and focus on learning and not feeling hungry. Ontario is the only province that hasn't moved forward with this. It's time we did it.
Yesterday, Bonnie Crombie said, and I quote, "I'm calling on everyone who voted NDP in the last election to vote Liberal. The only way to change government is to work together," close quote. Now, I thought that was a little bit rich coming from the Liberal Party, who's basically been reduced to the minivan party, asking NDP supporters to not go and vote for their own party, not vote for the leader of the opposition. What would you have to say to Bonnie if she was here with us right now?
Well, I would say that I think that says everything you need to know right now about where the Liberal Party is at. I think they're focused on surviving and on basically regaining their status as a party in the legislature. That's not where I'm at. I'm very focused on flipping blue seats, conservative seats, to orange. Because look, as far as I'm concerned, when Doug Ford called this election a few weeks ago, he quit as premier. I'm applying for that job. I think we offer a real change for Ontario. And I would also say this, people should be able to vote based on their values, what they truly believe the vision is that they want to see for this province. I think it's pretty cynical to take that approach. But look, as I said, Doug Ford, he quit his job as premier. I think Bonnie Crombie has given up the fight. Well, I will not. I will not quit. I will keep fighting. I believe we can flip seats from blue to orange. And the other thing people need to understand is we have seats already in every region of this province, in every corner of this province. So we're in a very good situation right now. We have boots on the ground all across Ontario. And I'm feeling the excitement coming out of the debate as well. A lot of new energy out there. So I'm feeling very optimistic. But again, I always look at it like I'm not going to tell somebody, I'm not going to try and take that approach. I want to earn their votes with the vision that I put forward.
We are just 8 days away from the election, when the people of Ontario elect 124 members of provincial parliament. When you wake up the next morning, when does success look like for the Ontario NDP Party?
Like I said, I'm in it to win. I really believe that we cannot afford another 4 years of Doug Ford and the Conservatives. I know that Ontarians are just starting to wake up to the fact that an election is happening. And these are crucial days when people start to turn their thoughts to the election and the opportunity. They have an opportunity to make change. And I hope that they'll do that. I believe they will. And so success for me is we form a government that's ready to dive right in and address things that other governments, and this Conservative government in particular, have said they would do and have failed at: to start building homes, to start hiring doctors, fight rising costs, fix our schools, and frankly, also fight for every single job. And every single Ontarian. That's my vision. That's where I want to be the day after the election. I want to be rolling up my sleeves and getting it done for Ontarians.
Thank you very much for joining us today on the Radical Center. And we really appreciate your time and, taking the opportunity to share with us your plan for Ontarians as this election approaches in just over a week. We appreciate your time, and we hope that you will join us once again in the future, hopefully as Premier.
Yes. Well, and thank you so much for the opportunity, and thanks for all you're doing as well, getting all this information out to people. It's super important.
Thank you.
Thank you.